The Princess of Wales pledged herself to serve her country and her people, and to maintain the precious principles of constitutional government which lie at the heart of our nation.
It began with a quiet exchange during preparations for the Coronation Anniversary celebration at Buckingham Palace, a moment palace aides desperately tried to keep behind closed doors. But when Princess Catherine emerged beside Prince William with an expression that stunned even senior royals, whispers erupted through the corridors of the monarchy. Something historic had just been decided, and according to insiders, it would permanently reshape Catherine's future inside the firm. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Reports suggest the atmosphere inside the palace had already shifted days before the celebration officially began. Long before guests arrived, and before the final preparations for the anniversary event were complete, palace staff allegedly noticed unusual movements happening behind the scenes. Security access points were quietly adjusted. Certain corridors inside Buckingham Palace were temporarily restricted. Senior aides who normally operated with confidence suddenly became guarded, careful with their words, even among trusted staff. It was subtle at first, almost invisible to outsiders, but for those familiar with how the royal household functions, the tension was impossible to ignore. Something major was unfolding behind closed doors, and the silence surrounding it only intensified the speculation. According to palace insiders, King Charles III personally requested an urgent private meeting involving Prince William, Catherine, and several senior advisors connected to the future direction of the monarchy. Different interpretations of the meeting describe it as emotional, deeply strategic, and far more consequential than anyone initially realized. The king, already facing ongoing health concerns that have cast uncertainty over the stability of the crown since early 2024, reportedly wanted decisions finalized before the anniversary event placed the entire royal family under global scrutiny. Sources close to palace administrative circles claimed Charles had become increasingly aware that the monarchy's future now depended not only on tradition, but on public trust, emotional connection, and stability during a time of growing anxiety around the institution itself. And within those conversations, Catherine's name allegedly became central to everything. Insiders whisper that Catherine was informed during that meeting of a major ceremonial elevation tied directly to the future image of the monarchy. Not merely another royal duty, not simply another appearance beside William, but a transformation in how the palace intended to present her to the nation moving forward. Reports suggest aides were immediately instructed not to discuss revisions made to the anniversary protocols, particularly changes involving Catherine's positioning during key ceremonial moments. Even among seasoned royal staff, the secrecy surrounding those adjustments was described as highly unusual. Some insiders claim final rehearsal arrangements were rewritten at the last possible moment after Charles personally approved a revised structure for the event. And while palace officials publicly maintained complete silence, media commentators and royal correspondents quietly began noticing something strange. Catherine's visibility inside preparations had expanded dramatically. Guests attending rehearsal functions reportedly observed senior figures treating her with a level of formality and deference that felt noticeably different from previous royal events. There were whispers that the monarchy was preparing the public for something much larger than an anniversary celebration. At the center of it all stood Catherine herself, calm on the surface, yet carrying the visible emotional weight of what insiders described as an enormous private responsibility. Some even claim William remained unusually protective throughout the preparations, carefully staying close to Catherine during internal discussions, as if both understood the magnitude of what was approaching. And when the royal family finally appeared before the public during the Coronation Anniversary event, observers immediately sensed that the balance inside the monarchy had shifted. Catherine was no longer simply participating in the institution's future. According to those watching closely, she was being positioned at the very heart of it. But the announcement itself was only part of the story, because behind the celebration stood a deeper struggle over who would truly define the monarchy's next era. The anniversary was supposed to celebrate the triumph of the crown. Instead, it became the moment the royal family quietly revealed who they believe will carry the monarchy into its most uncertain chapter since the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. What began as a carefully orchestrated celebration of continuity soon transformed into something far more significant. far more emotional. And according to palace insiders, far more deliberate than the public was ever meant to understand. Reports suggest the entire Coronation Anniversary event had been designed months in advance as a symbolic reassurance to a nation increasingly anxious about the future of the monarchy. The institution needed stability, it needed confidence, but above all else, it needed a figure capable of carrying public trust through a period defined by uncertainty surrounding King Charles III's health and the growing pressure facing the royal household. And within those quiet palace calculations, one name reportedly kept rising above all others: Catherine. Insiders whisper that senior palace advisors spent weeks debating how visibly she should be positioned during the anniversary ceremonies. Some believed the shift should remain subtle, almost invisible to the public eye. Others allegedly argued the monarchy could no longer afford hesitation. According to royal commentators familiar with internal planning discussions, the final decision came directly from the highest level of the institution itself. Catherine would not simply attend the event beside Prince William. She would stand at the center of it. And once the ceremony began, even longtime royal observers noticed the change immediately. During key moments traditionally reserved for senior sovereign symbolism, Catherine appeared positioned unusually close to King Charles III, creating what several palace analysts later described as a deeply intentional message about continuity, trust, and the future direction of the crown. Different interpretations of the seating arrangements quickly began circulating through royal media circles. Some believed the adjustments reflected Charles's growing reliance on William and Catherine as the monarchy's stabilizing force. Others interpreted the move as something even larger, a quiet acknowledgement that the institution had already begun emotionally preparing the public for the next royal era, long before any official transition could ever be announced. Reports suggest revisions were even made to the procession order and speaking responsibilities in the final days before the anniversary event, triggering confusion among some aristocratic attendees who reportedly realized the evening no longer revolved solely around celebrating the king's coronation legacy. Instead, according to insiders, it increasingly felt like an introduction to the monarchy's future leadership structure unfolding in real time. Several senior aristocrats were allegedly stunned by the extraordinary level of visibility Catherine received throughout the evening. For decades, the monarchy has relied on carefully controlled symbolism, where even the smallest positioning choice can carry enormous meaning. And this time, the symbolism was impossible to ignore. Palace administrative sources claim Catherine was granted a level of ceremonial prominence rarely seen for a Princess of Wales during a reigning monarch's active rule. Comparisons to Diana, Princess of Wales, quickly resurfaced among commentators, though insiders insist the palace was determined to frame Catherine differently, not as a disruptive force of emotional popularity, but as a disciplined guardian of royal continuity during a fragile moment for the institution. Meanwhile, Prince William reportedly spent much of the evening in close coordination with palace officials, quietly monitoring every detail surrounding the ceremony and Catherine's expanded role within it. Sources familiar with royal operations suggest William understood exactly what was unfolding beneath the surface. This was not merely about optics. It was about survival. The monarchy, weakened by years of scandals, divisions, health crises, and public uncertainty, appeared to be consolidating its future around the one figure insiders believe still commands widespread trust across generations. And while the public saw elegance, unity, and celebration, those inside palace walls allegedly witnessed something far more profound taking shape. A silent transfer of emotional authority inside the House of Windsor itself. Yet while the cameras captured elegance and celebration, palace insiders claim another emotional reaction was unfolding quietly behind the scenes. As applause echoed through the grand halls, insiders whisper that not every royal welcomed the announcement with celebration. For some within the institution, Catherine's rise represented something far more unsettling: the undeniable shift of power toward a new generation. Behind the polished smiles and carefully measured public appearances, reports suggest an entirely different emotional atmosphere was unfolding within the private corridors of the royal household. While the public viewed the Coronation Anniversary event as a triumphant display of unity and continuity, palace insiders allegedly sensed growing unease among certain senior circles who understood exactly what Catherine's expanded prominence truly meant. According to sources familiar with internal royal dynamics, the evening quietly confirmed what many within the institution had feared for months: The monarchy was no longer cautiously preparing for the future. It had already begun restructuring itself around William and Catherine. And for some members of the royal establishment, that realization carried consequences far beyond symbolism. Different interpretations of the event describe a palace increasingly divided between those determined to preserve older power structures and those convinced the survival of the monarchy now depended on embracing a younger, more trusted public image. Insiders claim Catherine's influence has expanded rapidly behind closed doors over the last year, particularly during periods when King Charles III faced mounting health concerns and Prince William assumed a greater share of senior royal responsibilities. What once appeared to be a gradual evolution suddenly began looking far more deliberate. Courtiers reportedly started referring to Catherine privately as the stabilizing center of the monarchy's future, a phrase that quickly spread through aristocratic and diplomatic circles surrounding the crown. And according to palace administrative sources, that growing perception deeply unsettled certain figures who had long operated comfortably within the traditional hierarchy of the institution. Among the most persistent whispers emerging from the anniversary event were claims that Queen Camilla appeared unusually tense throughout portions of the evening. Royal observers noted subtle moments of emotional distance during key ceremonial exchanges, though insiders insist the discomfort had little to do with personal rivalry, and far more to do with the shifting balance of influence inside the House of Windsor itself. For years, Camilla's position within the monarchy required careful management, patience, and gradual public acceptance after decades of controversy surrounding her relationship with King Charles III. But now, according to reports circulating among palace staff, the institution's attention seemed increasingly centered elsewhere. Catherine represented continuity, stability, discipline, the kind of modern royal figure capable of reconnecting the monarchy with a public exhausted by scandals, divisions, and uncertainty. And as those comparisons quietly intensified, so did speculation about what responsibilities Catherine may soon inherit behind the scenes. Palace insiders claim discussions have already emerged regarding Catherine taking on additional constitutional and diplomatic duties traditionally reserved for the most senior working royals. Some royal commentators believe Charles has become increasingly determined to secure the monarchy's long-term stability, while he still has the authority to shape its future direction personally. Others suggest the king understands that public confidence in the institution now rests heavily on the image William and Catherine project together. Reports indicate Charles has been deeply moved by Catherine's loyalty during some of the monarchy's most difficult periods, particularly as the royal family navigated illness, internal fractures, and relentless public scrutiny. Unlike figures who allegedly fueled instability or conflict, Catherine reportedly earned quiet respect inside the institution through restraint, consistency, and an almost unwavering commitment to duty even during moments of enormous personal pressure. That reputation, according to insiders, has transformed how senior palace advisors now view her role within the crown's future. Increasingly, the royal household appears to be framing William and Catherine not simply as the next generation of royals, but as the emotional and institutional anchor meant to guide the monarchy through the uncertainty ahead. And while the public focused on the elegance of the anniversary celebration, insiders claim the real battle unfolding behind palace walls involved something far more consequential than ceremony or appearances. It was a struggle over influence, succession, and the future identity of the monarchy itself. But according to insiders, the real significance of the announcement had nothing to do with ceremony. It was connected to a decision Charles had been considering for months. Long before the anniversary celebration began, reports suggest King Charles III had already reached a deeply personal conclusion. The monarchy could no longer rely solely on tradition. It needed Catherine. According to insiders familiar with conversations taking place behind palace walls over recent months, the king had become increasingly consumed by one central fear: the possibility that the institution his mother spent her entire life protecting could slowly lose the emotional trust of the public during a period of instability, unlike anything the modern monarchy has faced in decades. Since early 2024, concerns surrounding Charles's health, combined with ongoing tensions inside the royal household, reportedly forced senior advisors to confront difficult questions about the future far sooner than anyone expected. And within those private discussions, one reality allegedly became impossible to ignore. The crown still possessed history, ceremony, and constitutional power. But history alone was no longer enough to guarantee confidence in the monarchy's future. Reports suggest Charles held multiple confidential meetings with senior advisors, communication strategists, and constitutional aides focused almost entirely on succession optics and long-term public perception. Different interpretations of those meetings describe a king deeply aware of how fragile the institution could become if the next generation failed to inspire stability during uncertain times. According to palace insiders, Charles repeatedly raised concerns about maintaining public trust while the monarchy navigated illness, political scrutiny, generational division, and growing public exhaustion with royal controversy. Sources close to royal administrative circles claim the king understood something many inside the institution had resisted admitting openly for years. The survival of the monarchy now depended less on ancient symbolism and more on emotional credibility with the public. And increasingly, that credibility appeared tied directly to Catherine. Palace insiders whisper that Catherine's extraordinary popularity began influencing strategic decisions at the highest levels of the institution long before the anniversary event was finalized. While other royal figures often attracted headlines through controversy, tension, or division, Catherine reportedly became viewed internally as a calming and dependable presence, capable of reconnecting the monarchy with ordinary people during difficult periods. Advisors allegedly studied public reaction to her appearances, speeches, charitable initiatives, and even moments of personal adversity, concluding that she possessed something increasingly rare within the modern royal system: broad public trust without the chaos of unpredictability. According to insiders, William strongly encouraged the palace to embrace a more visible and substantial role for Catherine, rather than keeping her confined within carefully limited ceremonial expectations. Reports suggest he privately argued that the monarchy could no longer afford to underestimate the emotional connection Catherine had developed with the public over the years. And slowly, Charles reportedly began to agree. Different interpretations of the king's thinking describe a man deeply shaped by the long reign of Queen Elizabeth II and her extraordinary ability to plan decades ahead while preserving the stability of the crown through crisis after crisis. Insiders claim Charles increasingly viewed Catherine through a similar lens, not as a temporary public figure, but as a long-term institutional anchor capable of carrying the monarchy through uncertainty with discipline, restraint, and consistency. That realization allegedly transformed how palace officials approached the Coronation Anniversary event itself. What the public believed was simply a celebration of continuity reportedly became something far more strategic behind the scenes. A carefully orchestrated symbolic transition designed to introduce Catherine's expanding importance to the nation, without ever explicitly announcing it. Sources suggest the event was chosen precisely because it carried emotional and historical weight, allowing the monarchy to quietly signal its future direction, while remaining protected beneath the language of celebration and unity. Yet despite the growing pressure surrounding her role, insiders claim Catherine initially hesitated when discussions about expanded responsibilities intensified. According to palace sources, she understood the enormous personal sacrifices tied to deeper involvement at the center of the institution, particularly during a period already filled with emotional strain for the royal family. But reports suggest Catherine ultimately accepted the shift not out of ambition, but out of duty. Those close to palace operations claim she recognized the monarchy was entering one of the most uncertain chapters in modern royal history, and stepping back was no longer viewed as an option. By the time the anniversary celebration finally arrived, the decision had already been made. The monarchy was preparing for the future. And according to insiders, Catherine had quietly become central to that survival strategy long before the public realized what was happening. However, the emotional weight of the announcement became even clearer once the palace released details that stunned royal observers across Britain. Then came the moment that changed everything. Beneath glittering chandeliers and centuries of royal tradition, the palace delivered an announcement many believed would not happen for years. And Catherine's reaction said more than any official statement ever could. For weeks, speculation had quietly spread through royal circles that the Coronation Anniversary celebration would contain some form of symbolic message about the future of the monarchy. But few anticipated the scale of what was about to unfold. According to insiders, even some senior members of the royal household remained unaware of the final wording, until shortly before the announcement was delivered. That secrecy only intensified the emotional shock once the palace formally confirmed Catherine's expanded ceremonial leadership role before an audience already emotionally charged by the significance of the evening. Reports suggest the atmosphere inside the royal household shifted instantly the moment the announcement was made public. What had begun as a carefully choreographed anniversary celebration suddenly transformed into something much larger, a declaration about the monarchy's future direction during one of the most uncertain periods in modern royal history. Palace insiders claim the statement was crafted with extraordinary precision, designed not only to honor Catherine's growing responsibilities, but to quietly reinforce confidence in the institution itself at a time when public anxiety surrounding King Charles III's health continued to grow. And according to royal commentators, the symbolism behind the decision could not have been clearer. The crown was preparing the public emotionally for a gradual transition of visibility, influence, and responsibility toward the next generation. Outside the palace grounds, reports suggest crowds erupted almost immediately in support once details of the announcement spread across Britain. Royal supporters gathered beyond the gates allegedly began chanting Catherine's name, while commentators across television networks struggled to fully capture the scale of what had just happened. Different interpretations emerged within minutes. Some analysts described the move as a carefully measured constitutional adjustment meant to strengthen public stability during a sensitive period for the monarchy. Others viewed it as something far more historic, a quiet but unmistakable confirmation that Catherine had now become central to the institution's long-term survival strategy. International media outlets moved quickly to frame her not simply as the Princess of Wales, but increasingly as the defining future figure of the monarchy itself. Comparisons to past royal turning points spread rapidly across global headlines, with commentators emphasizing how rarely the palace signals institutional shifts so openly, while a reigning monarch still remains on the throne. Yet despite the extraordinary attention surrounding her, Catherine herself reportedly remained remarkably composed throughout the announcement. Insiders whisper that behind her calm expression stood the enormous emotional weight of understanding precisely what this new role would demand from her moving forward. Sources close to palace staff claim Catherine appeared deeply moved during portions of the ceremony, particularly as senior royal figures publicly acknowledged her expanded importance within the crown. But according to those observing closely, she never allowed emotion to overpower the sense of discipline and restraint that has increasingly defined her image within the institution. That composure only intensified public admiration surrounding her role. Many royal watchers began describing Catherine not merely as a future queen, but as the emotional stabilizer the monarchy desperately needed during a period marked by exhaustion, scandal, illness, and uncertainty. Throughout the evening, Prince William reportedly remained closely protective and visibly supportive, carefully positioning himself beside Catherine during several key moments that insiders claim carried enormous symbolic significance behind palace walls. Sources suggest William understood the immense pressure now resting on Catherine's shoulders, and deliberately worked to project unity, reassurance, and strength during the event. Their partnership, already viewed by many within the royal household as the institution's greatest remaining asset, appeared stronger and more strategically important than ever before. Commentators later described the anniversary celebration as a genuine turning point for the House of Windsor, a moment when the monarchy stopped cautiously hinting at the future and instead openly embraced it before the world. But while the public celebrated the moment, insiders claim the palace was already preparing for the political consequences that would follow. Behind the polished smiles and carefully choreographed photographs, reports suggest the announcement triggered quiet panic in certain royal circles, because Catherine's elevation may have confirmed who truly holds influence inside the modern monarchy. According to insiders familiar with the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace following the Coronation Anniversary event, the public celebration masked an increasingly tense internal reality. While crowds outside the palace celebrated what many viewed as a hopeful vision for the monarchy's future, some within the institution allegedly understood that the announcement represented far more than ceremonial recognition. It was, according to palace commentators, the clearest indication yet that the balance of authority inside the House of Windsor was quietly shifting toward a new center of power. And for figures who had spent years operating within older royal structures, that realization reportedly triggered deep anxiety behind closed doors. Sources close to palace operations claim senior aides quickly became divided over one central question: how rapidly should Catherine's influence continue expanding within the institution? Some advisors reportedly argued the public response to the anniversary announcement proved the monarchy needed to move decisively, embracing Catherine's popularity and allowing her to assume a larger public leadership role sooner rather than later. Others allegedly warned against accelerating the transition too aggressively, while King Charles III remains on the throne, fearing it could unintentionally create perceptions of instability or overshadow the authority of the reigning monarch himself. But according to insiders, those internal disagreements only intensified after the overwhelming reaction from both the British public and international media made one thing impossible to ignore. Catherine was no longer simply admired. She was increasingly viewed as essential. And that shift, palace sources suggest, carried enormous political consequences within royal circles. Reports indicate some royal figures privately fear becoming sidelined, as the monarchy gradually reorganizes itself around William and Catherine's growing influence. For years, the institution relied on carefully maintained hierarchies, where seniority, tradition, and protocol determined visibility and importance. But insiders whisper that public trust has now become the monarchy's most valuable currency, and few within the royal household currently command that trust more effectively than Catherine. According to palace commentators, the anniversary event symbolized what one insider described as the beginning of the next reign before it officially begins. That phrase reportedly spread rapidly through royal media circles after observers noticed how naturally William and Catherine appeared to occupy the emotional center of the celebration even while Charles remained king. Different interpretations of the event compared Catherine's rise to earlier transitional moments in royal history, when the institution quietly began emotionally preparing the public for future leadership, long before constitutional reality officially changed. Comparisons were drawn to the late Queen Elizabeth II and the careful way she managed perceptions of continuity during moments of uncertainty throughout her reign. Insiders claim Charles increasingly views stability as his greatest responsibility during this final chapter of his monarchy, particularly while ongoing health concerns continue casting a shadow over the institution's future. Reports suggest the king has become determined to avoid allowing instability, division, or public anxiety to weaken the crown during his reign, even if doing so requires gradually elevating William and Catherine's visibility far earlier than previous royal transitions might have allowed. And according to palace sources, that strategy has already begun reshaping how senior figures inside the monarchy operate behind the scenes. Increasingly, William and Catherine are being viewed not merely as the future king and queen, but as a united strategic force capable of protecting the monarchy from further public erosion. Palace insiders describe their partnership as disciplined, coordinated, and emotionally balanced in ways that senior advisors believe resonate powerfully with the public. More importantly, reports suggest the monarchy's future image is now becoming inseparably tied to Catherine's public standing. Her composure during periods of crisis, her loyalty through years of scrutiny, and her ability to maintain emotional connection without fueling controversy have allegedly transformed her into one of the institution's most valuable assets. But with that growing influence comes enormous pressure, enormous expectation, and according to insiders, enormous resistance from figures uncertain about where they fit within this evolving royal structure. Because behind every carefully managed transition inside the monarchy lies another story, one involving fear, ambition, survival, and control. And as tensions quietly spread behind palace walls, one final moment at the anniversary event left even veteran royal observers stunned. It was not the speeches, the jewels, or the ceremony that captured the nation's attention. It was a single glance exchanged between King Charles III and Catherine, a silent moment many now believe symbolized the monarchy's future unfolding in real time. According to royal insiders, the atmosphere inside the palace shifted almost instantly during that brief interaction, as though everyone present suddenly understood they were witnessing something far more significant than a ceremonial anniversary celebration. Reports suggest the exchange lasted only seconds, yet its emotional impact spread across Britain within minutes. Cameras captured the moment with startling clarity. Charles, visibly reflective after an evening filled with symbolism and mounting public emotion, reportedly turned toward Catherine with an expression commentators later described as unusually personal, almost relieved. Catherine, calm but visibly moved by the weight of the evening, responded with the same composed restraint that has increasingly defined her public role within the monarchy. But according to palace insiders, what passed between them in that moment required no official statement, because the message was already unmistakable. Royal commentators immediately began interpreting the exchange as a symbolic gesture of trust, approval, and quiet reassurance from a king carrying the enormous burden of protecting the institution during one of its most uncertain modern chapters. Different interpretations quickly emerged across royal media circles, but many focused on the same central theme. The monarchy appeared to be emotionally acknowledging its future before the public in real time. Some analysts even compared the moment to defining transitional scenes from previous royal generations, when emotional symbolism revealed more about the future of the crown than carefully prepared speeches ever could. The comparison to Queen Elizabeth II became especially difficult to ignore. Throughout her reign, Elizabeth understood the extraordinary power of silent gestures, calculated symbolism, and carefully controlled public moments. And according to insiders, Charles may have intentionally echoed that approach during the anniversary event by allowing the emotional reality of the monarchy's transition to reveal itself naturally, rather than forcing it through formal declarations. Outside the palace grounds, the reaction reportedly became immediate and overwhelming. Crowds gathered beyond the gates allegedly began chanting Catherine's name, as news coverage replayed the exchange repeatedly across television broadcasts and social media platforms. Sources familiar with palace operations claim even seasoned royal staff were stunned by the emotional intensity of the public response. According to insiders, many within the institution had expected support for Catherine's expanded role, but few anticipated the depth of emotional connection people would display following that single moment with the king. Palace staff reportedly described the atmosphere afterward as historic, emotionally overwhelming, and unlike anything they had witnessed since the early years of William and Catherine's marriage. For many observers, the reaction confirmed what senior advisors had quietly suspected for months. Catherine had evolved beyond being simply a respected royal figure. She had become emotionally tied to the public's hopes for the monarchy's survival and renewal. Throughout the evening, Catherine's composure continued drawing widespread praise from both royal commentators and palace insiders alike. Despite the extraordinary pressure surrounding the announcement and the growing speculation about her future responsibilities, she reportedly maintained the same calm discipline that has increasingly earned admiration inside the institution. Sources claim senior palace figures privately viewed her handling of the event as proof that she possessed the emotional steadiness necessary for a far greater role within the crown moving forward. Meanwhile, Prince William remained consistently close beside her, reinforcing what many commentators now describe as the monarchy's most strategically important partnership. Reports suggest King Charles himself left the anniversary celebration deeply satisfied with how the transition had been received publicly, particularly after months of concern about maintaining stability during ongoing uncertainty surrounding his reign. According to insiders, the overwhelming support for Catherine reassured the king that the monarchy's future still possessed a path forward, capable of restoring confidence and emotional unity around the institution. Yet beneath the relief and celebration, many within palace walls allegedly understood that the emotional power of that silent exchange had changed something permanently. Because once the public emotionally embraces the future before the institution officially announces it, there is often no turning back. But the greatest significance of the night may not be what the royal family announced publicly. It may be what they quietly revealed without saying a single word. For years, the monarchy tried to present change as gradual, careful, and distant. But the Coronation Anniversary event shattered that illusion. Because what the royal family revealed about Catherine was not simply a ceremonial update, it was the clearest sign yet that a new royal era has already begun. According to insiders, the significance of the evening reached far beyond titles, protocol, or carefully managed public appearances. What unfolded inside Buckingham Palace was described by palace commentators as an emotional turning point for the institution itself. For decades, the monarchy survived by moving slowly, protecting tradition through caution and measured symbolism. But this time, the message felt unmistakably different. The royal household was no longer quietly preparing for the future in distant terms. It was placing that future directly in front of the public. And at the center of it all stood Catherine. Reports suggest palace officials now increasingly view Catherine not only as the future queen beside Prince William, but as the emotional and institutional foundation capable of guiding the monarchy through an uncertain modern age. Over recent years, the crown has faced relentless pressure, family fractures, public distrust, health concerns, political scrutiny, and growing questions about relevance in a rapidly changing world. Yet throughout those storms, Catherine reportedly became one of the few royal figures able to maintain broad public respect without fueling further division. According to insiders, that reliability transformed how senior palace advisors approached long-term planning for the monarchy's survival. Different interpretations of the anniversary event describe it as something carefully strategic, almost historic in its emotional precision. The monarchy was not simply celebrating continuity. It was introducing the public to the people expected to preserve it. And increasingly, William and Catherine are being presented as the stabilizing force of the crown itself. Sources close to royal operations claim King Charles III has become deeply determined to secure institutional continuity while he still can. After years spent waiting to inherit the throne, Charles reportedly understands better than most how fragile public trust can become during periods of uncertainty. Insiders suggest the king no longer sees protecting the monarchy as merely preserving old traditions. Instead, he allegedly believes the institution must adapt emotionally and symbolically to survive future generations. And within that strategy, Catherine's role has grown impossible to separate from the crown's long-term future. The overwhelming public reaction following the anniversary announcement only reinforced those calculations. Reports suggest palace officials were stunned by the scale of support Catherine received both inside Britain and internationally. Crowds outside the palace celebrated her expanded role with enthusiasm rarely seen during recent royal events, while commentators across global media framed the evening as the clearest sign yet that the monarchy's center of gravity is already shifting toward the next generation. According to palace insiders, one senior figure privately described the event as a controlled transfer of visibility and trust, carefully designed to reassure the public that stability would continue even as the monarchy entered a more uncertain chapter. That phrase reportedly spread quickly through royal circles because it captured exactly what many insiders believed they had witnessed. Not a sudden revolution within the crown, but a gradual emotional handover unfolding in plain sight. Increasingly, the monarchy appears to be entering a new phase centered around duty, unity, modernization, and emotional connection, rather than distant royal mystique alone. And perhaps no figure represents that transformation more powerfully than Catherine herself. Her journey from university student and royal outsider to one of the most trusted figures inside the House of Windsor has unfolded under relentless scrutiny, enormous pressure, and expectations capable of breaking even the strongest public figures. Yet according to those inside palace walls, Catherine endured because she understood something fundamental about the monarchy's survival. People no longer simply admire the crown. They need to believe in the people carrying it forward. That may ultimately explain why the anniversary event felt so emotionally significant to so many watching across Britain and beyond. It was not merely about ceremony or royal tradition. It was about reassurance. Reassurance that after years of uncertainty, conflict, and instability, the monarchy believes it has finally found the figures capable of guiding it into the future. And as the lights faded across Buckingham Palace and the anniversary celebrations came to an end, one truth remained impossible to ignore. The royal family had just revealed exactly who they believe will carry the crown into the future. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.